The silver tray hit the floor with a chilling clang that cut through the quiet elegance of first class. In that instant, every smug laugh from the suited men around her seemed to die mid-air. Naomi Carter, the black CAO of Carter Labs, the woman the tech world called the golden mind of the AI era, sat perfectly still, her eyes blinking once, as if recalibrating every beat of the world around her. At 39, Naomi had climbed through every hill of prejudice to stand at the summit of power. But today, in seat 1A on Altitude Airways flight 482 from New York to Zurich, she was being treated like she didn't belong. A young white flight attendant, Brittany Shaw, bent down, her voice as soft as silk, but her eyes cold as steel. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your first-class meal is unavailable." A cold sandwich was placed before Naomi beside a plain glass of water. Behind her, the sharp pop of a champagne cork burst through the air, sparkling cruel. Naomi said nothing, but inside her silence began to crack. Before boarding, she had thought this would be a peaceful flight, a chance to review the $4.2 billion contract between Carter Labs and Helvetic Data. She had chosen first class because for once she wanted to believe the world could be fair, a place where everyone paid the same price and received the same respect. But as it turned out, money couldn't buy dignity. The warm, golden light of the cabin brushed against her cheek, but it couldn't hide the faint shadow that had followed her all her life, the shadow of doubt. She remembered being 27, standing before the Silicon Valley Investment Board for her first presentation, when an investor had asked, "Are you the coder or just in charge of marketing?" That question back then had cut like a blade, and now, more than a decade later, that same blade returned, disguised as a cold sandwich. Naomi lifted her glass of water, her hand so steady that even Brittany faltered for a brief second. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to argue. Only her gaze, deep composed, recording everything. Every glance, every laugh behind her. Every little way people found to turn her into an outsider, inside a cabin where everyone was supposed to be equal. Across the aisle, Grant Radley, a silver-haired venture capitalist, leaned toward his companion. "What's her problem now?" Peter Malcolmson, an investment analyst, smirked. Probably a system glitch, or maybe she booked the wrong cabin. Their laughter was quiet, but every note landed on Naomi like invisible needles. She set the glass down slowly, as if closing a chapter. Her eyes drifted toward the window where the endless blue stretched like an open stage. The plane hadn't even taken off yet. Inside her, a storm was already rising. She remembered her mother's words. "When people look down on you, don't get angry. Make them face the truth." That was what Naomi had done her entire life, from boardrooms to conferences, from a programmer's desk to the CEO's chair. And today she would do it again, in a way that would make the entire airline industry bow its head. The announcement tone echoed overhead, signaling departure. Brittany returned her professional smile, perfectly practiced, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of arrogance. "Can I get you anything else?" Naomi looked up, her voice, low-measured, almost devoid of emotion. "No, I just need to remember this." Brittany's lips tightened into a forced smile as she turned away, her high heels striking sharp, cold rhythms against the carpet. Naomi took a deep breath. The scent of luxury perfume mingled with the faint tang of metal, creating a blend that was both elegant and suffocating. A male attendant nearby, David Nolan, about 40, glanced her way, then quickly looked off as if afraid to be involved. The silence in the cabin now had the shape of an accusation. Naomi reached for her tablet, The screen lit up, reflecting her face, composed, yet burning from within. On the screen were her contracts with Helvetic Data and lines of security code she had written years ago in Palo Alto. But this time she didn't see numbers. She saw a system, not a digital one, but a human one, where the errors weren't in the code, but in the people. Outside, the engines began to roar softly as the plane moved down the runway. Naomi closed her eyes. Beside her, Brittany leaned toward Grant Radley again, pouring more champagne, her smile gentler, now respectful, almost affectionate. Naomi opened her eyes, turning her head slightly, observing every motion, every glance. She engraved each one into her memory, as if saving it to a drive. Because she knew better than anyone, data never lies. And this time, the data would speak for her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now taking off," the captain's calm voice echoed overhead. Naomi leaned back into her seat, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her face expressionless. But in her mind, countless processes were coming online: the airline's VIP client database, the employee ID registry, the customer service compliance codes written under Altitude's corporate contract with Carter Labs. Each piece of information was a bullet loaded and waiting. The plane tilted upward, breaking through the clouds. Sunlight washed across Naomi's face, half bright, half a shadow. She closed her eyes again, not to sleep, but to activate her plan. High above, the sky remained clear and blue. But down below, as Naomi Carter tapped her smartwatch and sent 3 quiet words, "Emergency Audit Protocol," the world of Altitude Airways had just entered the biggest storm in its history. And Naomi. She stayed right where she was in seat 1. Her hand resting gently on the cold tray, her lips curving into the faintest smile, the kind that belongs to someone who knows that when silence runs deep enough, it turns into thunder. The plane pierced through thick layers of cloud, and the morning light streamed through the small cabin window, spilling across Naomi Carter's face, half illuminated, half shadowed. Outside, the sky was calm. Inside, the silence had weight. It wasn't empty. It was dense, heavy like a stone pressed against her chest. She closed her eyes, drew a slow breath, and let her senses guide her. The scent of wine, perfume, and new leather mingled with faint laughter from behind, all merging into the distinct soundscape of first class, a place where no one shouts, they simply measure each other's worth with their eyes. In the empty seat beside her, 1B Naomi's Hermes handbag rested neatly, a symbol of status, now reduced to a silent punctuation mark in a world that had just excluded her. Her hand brushed the handle gently, as if touching a quiet reminder, "You've come too far to stop here." Behind her, the dry clink of glasses rang out. Grant Radley, the silver-haired venture capitalist with a voice like a church bell, raised his glass with 2 colleagues. "You ever heard of Carter Labs?" he said, with a crooked smile. "Her company? A woman running a tech empire, hard to believe, isn't it?" A soft chuckle followed. "And now she's flying with us." Peter Malcolmson added, "First class, but eating a cold sandwich." "Fair, isn't it?" Their laughter broke the air, warm for them, freezing inside Naomi's heart. She didn't turn around. Not a word, not a movement. But her gaze dropped to the screen of her smartwatch, where a small icon blinked the encrypted signal had been sent successfully. On the other side of the world, in the glass tower of Carter Labs in Midtown Manhattan, Lauren Price, Naomi's executive assistant, received the command. 31 years old, sharp features, tight curls, pulled into a bun, the kind of woman who always knew exactly what to do, even in chaos. When emergency audit protocol flashed across her screen, She didn't ask questions. She simply pressed her lips together, lifted her coffee cup, took a slow sip, and began typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The system came alive. 3 data windows opened. Flight attendant Brittany Shaw's behavior file code, STR 9035, the VIP client feedback log from Altitude Airways, and the bias recognition database, the AI system, Naomi herself had built. Lauren slipped on her headset, her voice steady. Initiate linguistic and behavioral scan. Filter data from the last 36 months. The screen flickered. A line of red text appeared. Bias index 87.4%. Repeated discriminatory pattern detected. Lauren tilted her head slightly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. That's enough, she murmured. Then she typed, transfer report to executive oversight and legal. Code red line. 482. Within minutes, the storm had escaped the clouds and entered Altitude Airways' global data network. Meanwhile, Naomi sat motionless in seat 1, her eyes open, staring into the stillness ahead. No one knew that at that very moment, every action in the cabin, every glance, every tone, every delayed response was being recorded and analyzed in real time by Carter Labs' AI system. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to argue. All she needed was evidence. "Mom." The soft voice came from her side. Naomi turned. Brittany stood there, her face bright and composed, as if nothing had happened. "Would you like anything else, Mom? I might be able to find some fruit in the galley." Naomi smiled a smile that made Brittany pause for half a second. "No need," Naomi said calmly. "I just need you to remember every detail of this flight." Brittany smirked faintly. "Of course, Mom." She turned away, her heels striking the carpet in a rhythm of quiet arrogance. Naomi watched her go. No anger, no sorrow, only a coldness rising inside her like tempered steel, not weakening her but sharpening her. She opened her tablet, scrolling through the contract. In the corner of the screen, a new message appeared. Lauren Price audit complete. System detected 3 behavioral discrimination incidents by Attendant Shaw in the last 12 months. Previous complaints unresolved. Awaiting directive. Naomi typed one simple line, activate Tier 2, notify Altitude CEO directly. Across the ocean, Thomas Reynolds, CEO of Altitude Airways, was in a meeting in London when his phone vibrated. The subject line read, Carter Labs Emergency Culture Audit. He frowned. No one in the aviation industry was unaware of who Naomi Carter was, the woman whose research once forced the European Data Alliance to rewrite its privacy regulations. As Reynolds read through the report, his face drained of color. The summary was brief or cold, devastating repeated bias toward non-white passengers, ignored pre-ordered premium meal, despite confirmed booking, multiple unaddressed complaints. He looked up at his team. Prepare HR and legal. Meet me in Zurich when Flight 482 lands. Back in first class, Naomi felt the aircraft level out. Another attendant, David Nolan, approached quietly, his voice hesitant. Mom, I truly apologize for the inconvenience earlier. It may have been a system error. Naomi looked at him, her eyes calm but piercing. Which system, she asked. David hesitated. The meal ordering system, sometimes. No, Naomi interrupted, her tone smooth and cutting. I'm asking which system allows people to believe I don't deserve the meal I paid for. David froze. He lowered his head and stepped back. No one said a word, but everyone heard, and the silence once again had form. Naomi turned back to the cold tray before her and smiled faintly, not for herself, but for a world that believed discrimination had to be loud, when in truth it often whispered. Outside, the sunlight cut through the clouds, glinting across her hand, where the smartwatch trembled gently. Lauren's final confirmation had arrived. The storm was now fully online. Naomi lifted her glass of water, took a small sip, and closed her eyes. In her mind, her mother's voice echoed softly, distant, but clear. Don't let anger blur your judgment. Let reason make the world tremble. The plane soared toward the rising sun over Europe. Naomi Carter remained still in seat 1A. She didn't know that below a chain of urgent emails was racing across servers with the speed of a storm, but she knew one thing for certain: no silence lasts forever. And sometimes to change an entire system, all it takes is a cold sandwich and a woman who refuses to swallow it. The plane cruised at 36,000 feet, cutting through a sky so calm it felt as if nothing in the world could ever be disturbed. But for Naomi Carter, seated in first class, every cell in her body was burning with motion, as though she carried fire beneath her skin. The reflection from the personal screen before her flickered across her eyes, not the calm gaze of a businesswoman en route to Europe, but the fierce stare of a warrior preparing to strike back. From the galley behind, Brittany Shaw continued her flawless performance as the perfect flight attendant. She smiled, chatted poured wine, adjusted napkins, but every so often her eyes flicked toward seat 1A, where Naomi sat. That glance carried the arrogance of someone who believed she had just taught another person a lesson about their place in the invisible hierarchy of the world. She's still sitting there with that cold sandwich, Brittany whispered to her colleague, David Nolan, a smug smile on her lips. It's like she's punishing herself. David stayed silent, avoiding her gaze. He didn't have the courage to disagree, only muttering, "Britt, maybe she's someone important?" Brittany shrugged, lowering her voice, her lips curving in defiance. Important or not, no one's above anyone up here. On this plane, I decide who gets served first. Her words slipped into the cabin microphone system, one that recorded every sound and action as required by the airline. Naomi didn't know it, but she could feel something shifting in the air. A massive system was unknowingly recording its own wrongdoing. She reopened her tablet. A new report flashed from Lauren Price. Connection established with Altitude's coordination server. Behavioral analytics updating automatically. Probability of demographic bias, 89.1%. Recommendation: initiate personnel verification protocol upon landing. Naomi pressed her lips together, her fingers gliding across the screen as she typed in a secure code. Naomi Carter. Continue data collection. Create independent backup. Tag report redline 482. Maintain complete silence until my final signal. She leaned back. The hum of the engines blended with the soft rush of wind outside. Everything seemed peaceful, a deceptive calm like the social systems she had studied all her life. Naomi gazed out the window, where the clouds layered like fortress walls. She thought back to being 17, the only black girl in her computer science class at Stanford. Back then, every time she raised her hand, the professor's eyes would drift past her, searching for someone more fitting to speak. And when she turned in her first prototype of a security software design, they asked, "Are you sure this code is yours?" That question, like thousands of glances that followed throughout her life, was a form of violence that required no shouting, yet cut deep enough to leave permanent scars. Naomi opened her eyes. She had never forgotten those looks, and because of that, she couldn't let this flight be dismissed as a small incident. She reached for her encrypted satellite phone. The screen lit up with the stern face of Lauren Price on a secure video call. "Report," Naomi said. Lauren spoke quickly. "Altitude CEO Thomas Reynolds has received the information. The HR legal and internal audit teams are en route to Zurich. We have 7 hours before landing." Naomi nodded slightly. "Good. Preserve all data. I'll secure additional confirmation myself." She closed the phone, her gaze drifting toward the passengers. Brittany was leaning toward Grant Radley, her dress perfectly fitted, her smile textbook flawless. "Would you like more champagne?" Sir Grant chuckled. "If you're the one pouring, I'll take the whole bottle." Brittany laughed softly, a familiar, well-practiced melody. Naomi watched unblinking. Not out of envy, but understanding. Understanding the system built on selective courtesy, where some were deemed worthy of a smile and others of a shrug. And Brittany was merely a product of that system, a system Naomi would not allow to exist one day longer. David Nolan passed by his eyes, meeting Naomi's for a fleeting second before darting away. But his voice, quiet and trembling, reached her. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." Naomi turned slightly. For what? David swallowed hard. For being silent. Naomi's expression softened. Sometimes silence is the beginning of awakening. But if you stay silent after today, it becomes guilt. David lowered his head, his hands tightening around the serving tray. "I understand." As the cabin dimmed under the soft evening lights, Naomi opened her digital notebook and wrote a few lines not about contracts, but about feelings, something she rarely allowed herself. Discrimination is no longer a personal insult. It is a systemic disease, and I am the last doctor brave enough to operate. She closed the notebook, lifting her gaze. A storm was rising beneath her calm exterior. 3 hours later, as the crew served dinner, Brittany approached her again. "Ma'am," she said evenly, "we can now serve the meal you requested. A steak dinner just became available." Naomi looked up, her voice cool and precise. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry anymore." Brittany forced a smile. "That's a shame. It's one of our most popular dishes." "Then you should have it." Naomi interrupted softly, her tone gentle but absolute. The cabin fell silent. Everyone heard it, but no one moved. Brittany froze for a moment, then quickly turned away, her cheeks flushed not from shame, but from being challenged. Naomi watched her go, not with satisfaction, but with quiet pity. Because a system that teaches people to believe power lies in serving the right person is a system that keeps them small forever. The light outside shifted to pale blue. The edge of Europe appeared beneath the clouds. Naomi knew that once the plane touched down, everything would begin to collapse. But she wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt lighter, as if, after years of carrying the weight, she had finally found a way to fight back, without anger, without shouting, only with truth. She took a deep breath and smiled faintly. Somewhere in the depths of her mind, she heard her father's voice, the man who had passed away when she was young, an aircraft mechanic who had once told her, "You know, Naomi, planes don't really fly because of their engines. They fly because of the belief that something stronger than gravity exists." She closed her eyes. Her faith was no longer in the sky. It was in justice. And in the faint morning light, Seat 1A seemed to glow the place where a quiet revolution had begun, a fire burning in the middle of a sky that only appeared to be calm. A soft tremor made the glass of water on Naomi's tray ripple, reflecting the golden cabin lights above. The steady hum of the engines whispered endlessly, weaving together the familiar sound of the sky, a place where people believed they were separated from the world below, where money and status could buy peace. But today, that peace was nothing more than an illusion. Naomi Carter opened her eyes. 3.5 hours had passed since she sent the first signal. A new notification appeared on her watch. Lauren Price, data verification complete. Altitude's CEO is en route to Zurich. The legal and investigation teams will be at the airport upon landing, awaiting your next directive. Naomi brushed her sleeve lightly, her fingers grazing the watch, a small, deliberate gesture that carried the quiet assurance of total control. She knew that from this moment, every step, every word, every glance inside first class was being recorded. Not for revenge, but to prove that discrimination existed even in the most luxurious of places. Brittany Shaw returned to the front cabin, poised and confident. She had just completed her final round of wine service, her smile polished to perfection. "She's still just sitting there," Brittany murmured to her colleague. David Nolan glanced toward seat 1A, where Naomi sat silently, her meal untouched. "Yeah. She hasn't said a word. Hasn't called anyone." Brittany shrugged, her voice low but tinged with disdain. Maybe she finally realized her place. The words were casual, almost harmless, but to Naomi, who had spent her life hearing countless variations of that same phrase, they struck like a gunshot. Her place! That phrase had followed her everywhere. Only the tone and the suits of the people saying it had changed. She smiled softly, a smile no one saw. Not of anger, not of pain, just pure awareness. Outside, the sky darkened as the plane crossed into the night over the Atlantic. The navigation lights blinked steadily on the wings, tracing a shimmering path through the clouds. Naomi could feel the wind, not the wind itself, but the wind of change approaching. She remembered the year 2015 when her first funding pitch for Carter Labs was rejected. They told her, "Your AI technology is impressive, but we don't believe you have enough executive experience." They said it kindly with polite smiles and eyes that pretended to protect her from disappointment. A year later, that very same technology saved the Defense Department's data systems from a cyber attack. Naomi never forgot that morning, standing before the screen, as the words, "firewall secured by Carter Labs" appeared, and she whispered to herself, "I don't need them to believe in me. I just need them to acknowledge me." Now she was in another cabin, facing another battle, but the principle remained the same. The truth must be forced to look at itself, even if it takes a storm to do so. Naomi tapped the screen and sent a new command. Lauren, verify crew behavior records from the past 24 months. Activate voice and interaction algorithm. In Manhattan, Lauren received the message. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as multiple audio clips from altitude flights appeared on screen. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. It's a pleasure to serve you. I'm sorry, ma'am. We'll bring it as soon as possible." Brittany's voice sweet with some, cold with others. Lauren adjusted the filters, entering a command. Compare tone deviation based on demographic markers. The result appeared. Voice tone variation between white and non-white passengers, 52.8%. Average response delay 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Lauren exhaled. She was right. In the sky, Naomi opened her digital notebook and wrote the first line. "They tell me not to be angry. I'm not angry. I'm just remembering." She looked down at the cold meal tray, the sandwich untouched. The food had grown cold, but her resolve burned hotter by the minute. David passed by again, hesitated, then stopped. "Mom, is there anything you need?" Naomi shook her head, her voice gentle. "No, thank you. But maybe you can do one small thing for me." David leaned closer. "Of course. Just make sure that when I stand up, you don't look away." David didn't understand, but he nodded. There was something in her eyes, something that commanded both fear and respect. The look of someone who didn't demand power, but created it. Brittany approached, pushing the service cart to collect trays. Without looking at Naomi, she said flatly, "I hope next time you pre-order your meal earlier." Naomi turned her gaze toward her, calm and unnervingly composed. "Thank you, but I ordered earlier than anyone else on this plane." Brittany raised an eyebrow, her tone edged with defiance. Maybe the system made a mistake. Naomi nodded slightly, a faint smile crossing her lips. "I believe so. And that system is about to be corrected." 5 seconds of silence. The wheels of the service cart rolled softly against the carpet, fading into the distance. Naomi turned back to her screen. A new message blinked. "Lauren verification complete. 3 complaints suppressed in the system. 2 internal reports unresolved. Recommend direct escalation to CEO. Naomi. Send it. CC Altitude, Legal and Corporate Culture Department." She hit send. The data file left the system like a bullet leaving its chamber. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft blue, signaling nighttime rest. But Naomi didn't sleep. She tilted her head against the window, gazing at the stars outside, the only things in existence that cared nothing for color or rank. A thought echoed quietly within her. If they can silence me, they can erase everyone who comes after me. She closed her eyes. In the faint darkness, a small smile appeared, not of triumph, but of faith. Faith that a single calm woman sitting in Situne with a cold sandwich in front of her could shake the foundations of an entire airline empire. When the display showed 2 hours remaining to Zurich, Naomi opened her watch and sent the final command, activate automatic report. Upon touchdown transfer, all data to Altitude, CEO Human Resources, and the International Aviation Oversight Board. She smiled faintly and closed her eyes. No one in first class knew that beneath the soft glow of champagne and Italian leather seats, a quiet flame was burning. A flame not fueled by oil or gas, but by truth. And when it reached where it needed to, it would burn away every illusion wrapped in the luxury light of this world. The plane glided over European skies as the first rays of dawn swept across the windows of first class. The soft golden light made everything seem calm, yet inside Naomi Carter, the sun had not risen. It burned quietly like a storm, compressed, waiting for the moment to be released. She opened her eyes. On her watch, the final message from Lauren appeared. Lauren Price. All data has been compressed and transferred to Altitude's audit system. CEO Thomas Reynolds has confirmed receipt of the report. Legal and HR teams will be present upon landing. Naomi nodded slightly. Everything was now out of her hands, yet completely in her control. She no longer needed to say a word. The very system people believed to be all-powerful would now expose itself. The first-class cabin was unusually quiet. The men seated behind her reclined comfortably, chatting casually about billion-dollar deals, unaware they were sitting at the center of an earthquake. One of them laughed and said, "Brittany, another glass of Bordeaux, the 2008, please." "Of course," Sir Brittany replied sweetly. She walked gracefully, her pale blue dress swaying her high heels, tapping rhythmically against the carpet. She still believed she controlled this space, that a tray of food or a polite smile could decide who was respected and who was forgotten. What she didn't know was that every movement, every smile, every turn of her head had already been recorded and stored in Altitude's internal database. Naomi tilted her head slightly, watching Brittany stop a few rows back. An idea sparked in her mind, not one born of anger, but of timing. She unbuckled her seatbelt and pressed the call button. Ting. The sharp sound broke the stillness, drawing every pair of eyes in the cabin. Brittany turned her smile steady, but her eyes flickered with surprise. "Can I help you, Mum?" Naomi looked at her, her voice calm and even. "There's something I'd like to ask you." "Just one question." "Yes, Mum," Brittany replied. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her tone quiet, but every word landing clear and deliberate, like a verdict being read aloud. "Why do you think I was the only one who ran out of first-class meals?" The air froze. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then Brittany let out a nervous laugh, trying to compose herself. I'm not sure. It must have been a system error." Naomi's eyes didn't blink. A system error. Or a human error protected by the system. Her voice was neither raised nor sharp, but it carried enough weight to make Brittany step back. "Momitat, you know," Naomi interrupted, lowering her voice. "I once developed a program that detects bias in customer service interactions. It measures tone-eye contact, the delay between words and actions. Do you know what that system just recorded?" Brittany froze, her mouth slightly open. Naomi's gaze pierced straight through her. "It recorded that you didn't respect me. Not through your words, but through your silence." David Nolan, standing nearby, felt his chest tighten. He realized Naomi wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for every passenger who had ever been dismissed, for everyone who had stayed quiet to avoid conflict. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, placed a hand on the service cart, and spoke hoarsely but firmly. "Miss Shaw, I'll handle this from here." Brittany turned to him, her voice cold. "What do you think you're doing?" David met her eyes, honest, unwavering. "For the first time in 6 years working here, I don't want to pretend anymore." The air cracked like shattering glass. Brittany clenched her fists, her lips trembling, then turned and walked away. Naomi remained seated, but her eyes no longer belonged to someone enduring. They were the eyes of someone who had just awakened an entire system that had been sleeping in arrogance. Another soft ding came from her watch. A new message from Lauren appeared. "Lauren cabin voice data confirms repeated biased behavior from attendant Shaw. CIO altitude requests the cabin remain untouched. Investigation will begin immediately upon landing." Naomi closed her eyes. She knew this battle had shifted from emotion to evidence, from outrage to proof. And once data speaks, denial becomes impossible. Outside, the sun climbed higher, its golden light spreading across the thick white clouds. The glow reflected on Naomi's face, carving her features in metal and conviction. She opened the window shade, gazing out at the horizon, wondering how many people like her had faced this same treatment, not through violence, but through polite disregard. A thought rose within her. If I stay silent today, they'll keep believing we're afraid to speak. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Not today. Behind her, Grant Radley leaned toward his companion. Who is she? Feels like she's running this whole cabin. Peter chuckled dryly. Just another customer with an oversized ego, the kind who loves making drama. Naomi heard them. She didn't turn. She simply said, her voice calm, but cutting through the air. Drama. Sometimes drama is the only thing that makes people open their eyes. The cabin fell silent once more. An hour later, the captain's voice came over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing for landing in Zurich. Ground temperature is 19 degrees. Thank you for flying with Altitude Airways. Naomi opened her eyes and adjusted the collar of her blazer. The morning light painted her face with both softness and strength. She touched the cold tray before her. Sometimes, she whispered, cold is what people need to wake up. Brittany passed by one last time, her tone polite but unsteady. I hope you enjoy your stay in Zurich, ma'am. Naomi smiled, her expression calm but sharp as a blade. I will. What about you? Brittany froze. Neither spoke again. The plane descended through the final layer of clouds. The city of Zurich unfolded below red rooftops, a winding river, and the misty outline of the Alps in the distance. Inside the cabin, passengers fastened their seatbelts. Only Naomi remained still. She was no longer just a passenger on this flight. She was steering the direction of a conversation much larger than the cabin itself. As the wheels touched the runway, a sharp screech echoed a sound both powerful and final, like a declaration. Naomi opened her eyes and whispered, "It's time." And as the engines quieted, a new chapter for the airline and for the world was about to begin. The plane touched down with a long, piercing screech. A few passengers clapped, others smiled, relieved that the flight had gone smoothly. Only Naomi Carter, seated in 1A, remained still. Her gaze didn't turn toward the window, but stayed fixed ahead on the thin curtain separating first class from the cockpit, swaying slightly in the breeze. She knew this wasn't the end of the flight. It was the beginning of another kind of landing, the landing of an entire system that had believed itself as unshakable as the sky. The cabin doors opened. The Zurich light poured in, cold, clean, and brutally honest. Brittany Shaw stood at attention, her smile strained. "Thank you for flying with us. Have a wonderful day." Naomi rose. Her coat fell gracefully at her sides, her hand gripping the handle of her Hermes bag as she walked past Brittany. No glance. No words. Only a single sentence clear enough for everyone in the cabin to hear. No need to wish me one. I make my own good days. Brittany froze. Her face turned pale, her lips trembling, because in Naomi's eyes, she saw something that told her this was far from over. At the end of the jet bridge, two figures in black suits waited. One was Mark Ellison, Altitude Airways Regional Director for Europe, tall, composed, but visibly tense. The other was Julia Stein, the Regional Head of Legal Affairs. Both inclined their heads. "Welcome to Zurich, Miss Carter." Mark began carefully. "We want to personally apologize for the inconvenience on your flight." Naomi stopped meeting his eyes, her voice soft as breath, but heavy enough to thicken the air around them. No need to apologize. This wasn't an inconvenience, it was a diagnosis. Julia frowned slightly. A diagnosis, Naomi's eyes didn't waver. You've let the disease live inside the very service you claim is flawless. Today, I simply allowed it to show its symptoms so that everyone could see it's still alive. No one said another word. Naomi stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, like the steady beat of truth about to be revealed. Behind her, the crew began to disembark. Brittany walked among them, her face drained of color. David Nolan followed his eyes, downcast, silent. As they reached the terminal, 3 men in black suits stood waiting, blocking their path. One of them held up a tablet displaying cold, glowing words, Flight 482, Crew Emergency Debrief Room 4. Mandatory attendance. Brittany froze. There must be some mistake, she stammered. The man with the tablet looked straight at her. "No mistake, ma'am. Please come with us." David placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his voice quiet but firm. "Go, Brittany. Maybe now it's your turn to listen." In a small conference room within the airport's private wing, the air was so heavy it seemed you could hear the clock ticking. Brittany sat across from Julia Stein and two investigators. On the table, a tablet played the cabin's recorded audio. Ms. Shaw Julia said evenly, "We've reviewed the entire recording. Would you like to hear the part where you spoke to passenger 1? Brittany's lips trembled, her eyes glistening. "I didn't mean anything by it. I was just following procedure." Julia tilted her head. "Which procedure allows you to serve other passengers properly, but give a cold sandwich to a first-class traveller who pre-ordered a meal 7 days in advance?" Brittany swallowed hard, scrambling for words. "I thought it was a system error." "No, Brittany," Julia interrupted, her tone sharp as glass. "Not the system. You." The screen shifted to a short video clip from the front cabin camera. Brittany's voice played back clearly. "Up here, I decide who gets served first." Brittany went still, staring at the screen. Tears spilled over. Julia closed the tablet. "You're suspended immediately. The investigation will continue." Brittany sat frozen. For the first time in 6 years, she realized that a single careless sentence could destroy an entire career if it was said to the wrong person. Meanwhile, in the VIP lounge overlooking the runway, Naomi sat by the window, watching a line of planes taxi into position. Her phone vibrated. On the screen, a video call came through from Thomas Reynolds, CEO of Altitude Airways. Naomi answered. Thomas, a middle-aged man with silver hair and weary, sincere eyes, spoke first. "Ms. Carter, I wanted to apologize personally and to thank you." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "An apology I don't need. But thank me for what? For forcing us to see ourselves. I've read your assistant's report. Our entire system has been blind in its silence." Naomi said nothing. Thomas continued. "We'll be suspending the entire flight crew and launching a 24-month review across all staff. But I want to hear from you. What do you want me to do next?" Naomi looked out at the horizon, where sunlight shimmered off the metal wings of a departing jet. "Don't do it for me," she said slowly. "Do it for the ones who will sit in seat 1A after me. The ones without the Carter name, without a billion-dollar company to shield them. Do it for them." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Will you help me?" Naomi smiled faintly. "I won't help. I'll lead." Outside the conference rooms, reporters had already gathered. Leaks from within Altitude suggested an internal investigation into discriminatory conduct on Flight 482. Naomi didn't speak to anyone. She simply stood, walked through the flashing lights of the cameras, each step gentle yet echoing with impact. She knew she was no longer walking just for herself, but for everyone who had ever swallowed their silence after being dismissed. Elsewhere in the airport, David Nolan exited the debriefing room, sweat dampening his collar. He spotted Brittany sitting slumped on a bench, her head bowed. She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "David, I never hated anyone. I was just doing what I always do." David looked at her, his voice low but heavy. "That's the dangerous part, Brittany. Habit makes people believe doing wrong is normal." He turned away, leaving her trembling hands and blank stare behind. For the first time, she understood what it meant to live the consequences of trained indifference. As Naomi stepped through the glass doors into the arrivals hall, the Zurich wind brushed against her hair. The attendants bowed and opened the door to a sleek black limousine. She paused for a moment, looking up at the sky. The Altitude 482 was still visible above a silver streak, cutting through the clear blue. "Thank you for flying with us." the airport's automated voice announced over the speakers. Naomi smiled softly. "No," she whispered, "you're the ones who just landed." The car door closed, and as the wheels began to turn, the tremor Naomi Carter had set in motion started to ripple outward, from seat 1A to the entire sky above. 3 hours after Altitude Airways Flight 482 landed, the glass towers in downtown Zurich began to tremble with the news. A headline flashed across European CNBC: female CEO of Carter Labs denied first-class meal, Altitude Airways launches urgent investigation. One single headline, yet it dropped like a pebble into still water, sending ripples that began quietly, then surged like a rising tide. In the top-floor office of Altitude's Geneva headquarters, Thomas Reynolds stood before the window, staring down at the rain-soaked streets. On his desk lay the freshly printed preliminary investigation report, 27 pages thick, filled with data voice transcripts and behavioral analysis from the cabin. He turned to the final page, where a bold line still seemed to burn on the paper: confirmed discriminatory conduct exhibited by senior flight attendant Rebecca Shaw during Flight 482. Incident triggered by customer Naomi Carter. Thomas closed his eyes and exhaled heavily. He knew this moment would define Altitude's reputation for years to come. But beyond the fear of bad press, there was shame. "We let arrogance creep into the very service we built our name on," he murmured. Across the table, legal head Julia Stein nodded. "Ms. Carter isn't suing. She only wants us to fix it." Thomas looked up. "Then we'll do more than fix it. We'll let her lead." Meanwhile, at the Bar au Lac Hotel, where Naomi was staying, the lights on the 14th floor were still on near midnight. She sat by the window gazing out at the still surface of Lake Zurich. Her phone vibrated non-stop, dozens of calls, hundreds of emails from major media outlets. She hadn't answered a single one. A video call came through from Lauren Price. Her assistant's face filled the screen, a mix of anxiety and awe. Naomi social media is exploding. The hashtag Seat1A has passed 2 million mentions in 5 hours. People are sharing their own stories, times they were ignored, dismissed, made to feel invisible. Naomi was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "Is anyone defending Brittany Shaw?" Lauren blinked, defending her. After what she did, Naomi looked directly into the camera, her voice steady and low. "Because the problem isn't one person. It's the way the system teaches people that silence is normal. I'm not here for retaliation. I'm here to change the language they use to justify discrimination." Lauren bit her lip. She understood. She'd worked with Naomi long enough to know that when this woman said change, it meant a revolution was about to begin. The next morning, Altitude released an official statement. "We extend our sincere apologies to passenger Naomi Carter for the incident on Flight 482. An internal investigation has confirmed a serious violation of service protocol. All staff involved have been suspended. We are also formally inviting Miss Carter to serve as Global Service Culture Advisor." The statement hit the aviation world like an electric shock. CNN ran the headline, "A Black Female CEO Forces an Airline to Rewrite Its Policies with One Denied Meal." On Twitter, a post from an ordinary user went viral with over 300,000 shares. "I may not sit in Seat 1A, but I deserve respect." At Altitude's Geneva headquarters, Julia Stein and the HR team held an emergency meeting. "We'll launch a new training program," Julia said, pointing to the screen where the title glowed, "The Seat 1A Initiative." Thomas Reynolds nodded. Every attendant, Every employee from business class to maintenance will retrain, not just in service skills, but in how they see people. A communications manager asked, "Aren't we afraid people will think this is just for show?" Thomas's gaze hardened. No. What we fear most is silence, because silence is what created this disaster. Meanwhile, Brittany Shaw, the same woman who once glided confidently through first class, now sat in a closed conference room across from the investigations team. On the table lay printed excerpts of her old emails and internal messages, lines she had written without thought, Black Passengers Act entitled. People like her always complain. Each sentence landed like a stone sinking into her chest. "I didn't think it was that serious," she whispered. The HR lead replied evenly. "That's the problem, Ms. Shaw. People don't think. And that's how prejudice survives." When the session ended, Brittany stepped into the hallway. Through the glass, she saw Naomi leaving her hotel surrounded by reporters. In that moment, Brittany realized she didn't hate Naomi. She feared her because Naomi was the mirror reflecting the truth she had spent years denying. Outside, the hotel door swung open. Naomi Carter stepped into a forest of microphones and flashing cameras. "Ms. Carter, are you planning to sue Altitude? What do you want to achieve from this incident?" Naomi stopped. Her gaze was calm, serene, like Lake Zurich after rain. "I don't want compensation," she said slowly. "I want people to understand that every small action carries the power to define the world we live in. A cold meal may mean nothing but how people treat it. That's how they treat humanity." The reporters went silent. The shutters stopped clicking for a brief moment. Naomi bowed her head slightly, then walked away. Behind her, the digital billboards along Bahnhofstrasse lit up simultaneously with the message, "Seat won a respect is not a privilege. It's the beginning of civilization." That afternoon, Thomas Reynolds sent a personal email to Naomi. "We've begun. This time I promise the system won't fall asleep again." Naomi read it and smiled faintly. She didn't reply, because she knew true change doesn't begin with promises. It begins with actions taken when no one is watching. Night fell. Zurich returned to its usual calm, but deep within the city, the waves had started to stir. In cafes, airports, and offices, people were talking about Seat 1A. Some praised it, some debated it, but no one dared say it didn't matter. On television, the cabin footage of Naomi saying "system error" or "human error" played over and over. At the end of the segment, the anchor read one of her quotes aloud. "You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to act at the right time in the right place." On the 14th floor of the hotel, Naomi sat by the window again. The lake reflected the golden city lights and her silhouette. In her hand was a steaming cup of tea beside her, an unsent letter to her late mother, the woman who had once taught her, "Strength isn't found in retaliation, but in keeping your heart clean amid injustice." Naomi looked down at the still water and whispered, "I did it, Mom. But this is only the beginning." Outside, the night wind brushed across the surface of the lake. A small wave touched the shore, and Naomi Carter knew the real waves had only just begun to spread. 7 o'clock in the morning. The city of Geneva lay beneath a blanket of cold mist. In front of the Altitude Airways headquarters, dozens of reporters' cameras and broadcast vans crowded the entrance. The gold-plated logo of the airline, once hailed as the symbol of global prestige, now reflected hundreds of camera lenses. Inside, on the 21st floor in the company's largest conference room, the atmosphere was as heavy as lead. CEO Thomas Reynolds stood at the head of the long table, his face firm and pale. Behind him on the large screen glowed the words, "Internal Hearing Flight, 482 report." "Thank you all for being here early," Thomas began, his voice low but resonant. "Today we're not here to talk about PR or losses. We're here to talk about the disease that's been eating away at Altitude's honor." Beside him, Julia Stein began her presentation. Behavioral analysis indicates at least 6 similar cases of bias within the last 18 months. Each complaint was closed with the note, "Insufficient evidence." Ms. Shaw is not the only one at fault. She is merely the clearest symptom. Thomas placed his hand on the table, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces of the board members. "And Miss Carter," he said quietly, "has made the world see what we've been hiding behind the word incident for years." At that moment, the conference room door opened. Everyone turned. Naomi Carter entered not ceremoniously, not with an invitation. Just her in a white suit, her expression calm and composed. Thomas stood. "Ms. Carter, I didn't expect." Naomi smiled slightly, her voice soft yet decisive. "I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to rebuild." The room fell silent. Naomi walked to the table and set down a folder. "This is an analysis report from Carter Labs. It shows how your automated systems, from meal assignments to passenger priority rankings and name-calling frequency, have been influenced by subconscious bias." She raised her eyes. "No one taught your employees to discriminate, but your algorithms, your culture of favoring regulars, have unintentionally programmed it." Julia looked at Naomi and nodded. "What do you want us to do?" Naomi replied. "Start over. Rebuild your entire philosophy of service, not from privilege but from dignity." Thomas leaned forward, his voice steady. "If you're willing to lead, Altitude will follow." Naomi smiled faintly. "I'm not here to lead. I'm here to hold up a mirror so everyone can see themselves in it." News of the meeting leaked faster than planned. Media outlets erupted with headlines, "Altitude Airways partners with Carter Labs to redefine service culture." In New York, at the Carter Labs headquarters, Lauren Price took a call from Reuters. "We've heard Miss Carter is becoming Altitude's strategic advisor." Lauren smiled slightly. "No, she's not working for them. She's making them work for the world." Meanwhile, in another conference room downstairs, Brittany Shaw sat across from the disciplinary committee. She was no longer in uniform, just a wrinkled white shirt. Ms. Shaw, one of the directors, said, "Do you have anything to say before we make our decision?" Brittany swallowed hard. "I didn't think what I did was discrimination. It was just instinct. People like Ms. Carter don't usually sit in that seat. I wasn't used to it." The director looked at her calmly. "And it's exactly because of all the 'I'm not used to it's' that this world still hasn't changed. Today, you have to take responsibility for that habit." A document was placed in front of her, indefinite suspension. Brittany stared at it as tears streamed down her face. In her mind, she saw Naomi, the woman who hadn't shouted, hadn't retaliated, but had brought the entire wall around her crashing down. That same afternoon, Altitude held an international press conference. Naomi stood beside Thomas on stage. Behind them hung a simple white banner, redefining luxury respect as the first-class standard. Thomas spoke first. "We used to believe luxury meant giving customers what they wanted. Today we understand true luxury means making customers feel valued." Then he turned to Naomi. "Miss Carter, please." Naomi stepped forward. The light hit her face, cold, from the stage lamps, warm from conviction. Her voice rang out, not loud, but steady and full. This story isn't about me or about a first-class seat. It's about the moment we realize that every system, no matter how advanced, mirrors how we see people. She paused, scanning the room filled with reporters. And if we want a fairer world, don't wait for someone to carry the flag of justice. Start by pouring a glass of water for the person you've never noticed before. Applause filled the room, not thunderous, but long sincere and unbroken. That evening, her speech spread across social media, over 10 million views in 24 hours. In the comments, one user wrote, "She didn't change an airline. She changed how we define dignity." At the same time, in a small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, a 16-year-old black girl sat before her computer eyes, shining as she watched Naomi's face on the screen. She opened her notebook and wrote on the first line, "Tomorrow I'm signing up for the robotics club. And if anyone asks what someone like me can do, I'll tell them Seat 1A once belonged to someone like me." That night, Naomi returned to her hotel room, the soft golden light reflected on the lake outside. A message arrived from Lauren. "You did it. The whole world is talking about Seat 1A. Naomi read it, but didn't reply. She walked to the window, let the cold air in, and whispered, "No, Lauren, I haven't done it. I've only made them see the problem. Getting them to live differently, that's the hard part." She closed the window and looked at her reflection in the glass, a slender, proud, calm woman. Not a hero, not a victim, just a person who dared to say enough. On the floor below, Thomas Reynolds received an email from the board of directors. "We support the reforms. But remember, true reform isn't a promise, it's discipline." He leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. Outside, Geneva's night remained quiet, but within its silence, a fire was burning, the fire of truth, and Naomi Carter knew that fire, though silent, would be enough to light an entire sky that once believed the light only belonged to one color. A week after the press conference, the world still hadn't settled down. From New York to Tokyo, the hashtag Seat1A continued to flood news feeds everywhere. It was no longer just the story of one female CEO, but a wave of reflection sweeping across all walks of life, from passengers who had once been ignored to employees who had been taught to serve the ones who look more important. At Altitude's Geneva headquarters, the golden plaque at the main lobby had been replaced with a new slogan: "Luxury is not a privilege, it's respect." Thomas Reynolds signed an executive order, launching the Seat 1E initiative, requiring every staff member across 18,000 flights to complete a mandatory course titled Unconscious Bias and Human Dignity. And at the very beginning of that training manual, there was a short note with no author's name. "Remember, every tray you place, down every greeting you speak, can become evidence of how you see the world." When Naomi Carter returned to the United States, reporters were waiting for her at JFK Airport. But this time there were no aggressive questions, no flashing chaos of cameras. Only a young journalist stepped forward, voice trembling with emotion. "Ms. Carter, the world now calls you a symbol." "How does that feel?" Naomi stopped it. Her smile was light as a breeze. "I don't want to be a symbol," she replied softly. "I just want to live in a world where respect doesn't need to be protected by a scandal." That sentence became the headline of the Washington Post just hours later. She doesn't want to be a symbol, but the world needs her to be one. 3 months later, Altitude held a global summit titled Redefining the Culture of Service. Naomi was invited as the keynote speaker. She walked onto the stage in a navy blue suit, carrying no slides, only a large printed photo of the first-class seat where it all began. Seat 1A. "This seat doesn't belong to me," she said, her voice clear and steady. "It belongs to anyone who's ever been dismissed, misnamed, or made to feel they didn't belong. Seat 1A is just a chair, but it reminds us that every place deserves respect." The entire audience rose to their feet applauding, not just for the message, but because they saw in this woman something they had long forgotten, that compassion can stand beside power. That night, back in her office at Carter Labs, Naomi stood by the window, gazing at the lights of New York City stretching endlessly below. Lauren Price entered, setting a small package on her desk. "This just arrived from altitude," she said. Naomi opened it. Inside was a miniature replica of a first-class seat engraved with the words, "Seat 1, reserved for change." Naomi placed it on her desk and looked at it for a long time. Then she whispered softly, almost to herself, "Change didn't begin with Seat 1A. It began with those who dared to sit in it, even when the world didn't want them there." The city lights glowed against her face, strong yet serene. And somewhere out there, thousands of women anonymous passengers and people who had once been looked down upon were smiling at the sound of her name. Because from this moment on, Seat 1A was no longer just a seat. It was a reminder that sometimes justice only needs one person brave enough not to give up their place. 12 months later, morning at the Global Forum on Corporate Ethics in Washington, D.C. Thousands of delegates from around the world gathered under one roof. On the main stage, a large banner carried a simple white inscription, "The Seat 1, a movement from silence to systemic change." The lights dimmed, and Naomi Carter walked out, not surrounded by security, not adorned with the glow of celebrity. She carried only a thin folder and a gentle smile, yet the entire hall rose to its feet. The host introduced her. She didn't just change an airline, she changed the world's definition of respect. Naomi looked around, hundreds of faces, every color, every language. "Thank you," she began, her voice calm, warm, and grounded. "But what I value most today is not attention, it's awareness." She shared how since that event, Carter Labs had partnered with corporations across industries to develop technology that measures bias in workplaces, recruitment, and service environments. She spoke of employees who once feared speaking up, who are now teaching others to find their voice. And she spoke of Brittany Shaw, the woman once at the heart of the storm, now working as an instructor in a program called Learning to See Yourself Again. Naomi paused, her eyes soft, with quiet conviction. Real change doesn't happen when we remove the wrong people. It happens when the wrong people stop and choose to do what's right. The room fell silent, not with discomfort, but with reflection. At the end of her talk, she projected an image onto the screen, the old photo from that flight, a cold meal tray, and her own calm gaze. "This is where it all began," she said. "Not in a boardroom, not with a speech, but with one simple act. I refused to stay silent." She smiled faintly. "If anyone asks how to change a system, I would say with composure. Because anger can burn down a room, but calmness can light up an entire city." When the ceremony ended, Naomi stepped down from the stage amid waves of applause. A young college student approached, holding an old boarding pass in her hand. "Ms. Carter," she said, her voice trembling, "I was once removed from my seat because they said I didn't belong in business class. I saw your video, and today I'm studying law to defend people like me." Naomi placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled gently. "Keep that ticket," she said. "One day you'll fly in. Seat 1A. And when you do, don't forget to smile at the person still standing." That night, back at her hotel, Naomi sat by the window, watching the stream of headlights below. On the table lay a small card from Altitude. 1 year since Flight 482. Seat 1A is now kept empty on every Altitude flight as a symbol of change. We call it the seat of respect. Naomi ran her finger softly over the card and exhaled. She didn't need awards or titles. She only wanted the world to understand that respect is not a reward. It is the starting point of humanity. She stood, drawing the curtain open, letting the night light fall across her shoulders. In the reflection of the glass, her silhouette blended with the glow of the city, small but steady, a reminder that every great change begins with one person brave enough to stay in their seat and never let anyone take it away. And in the night sky above, an Altitude airplane passed by its seat 1. Still empty, reserved for the next ones, the ones who would never again stay silent. From the perspective of a corporate ethics expert, Naomi Carter's journey is not just the story of a first-class seat, but a reminder that dignity is not something to be given, it must be upheld. True human strength is not found in responding with anger, but in the ability to make an entire system reflect upon itself. When calmness is used at the right moment, it can create the kind of change that 1,000 shouts never could. If you believe this world needs more people who dare to stand and sit for what is right, then, like this video, to share that message, subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss stories where compassion is tested by power. And leave a comment below with the phrase that reflects your belief. Hold your dignity.